Greetings, this is rsmalec, and I'm going to be talking to you about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In fact, the Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy collection by Douglas Adams. This collection is made up of 5 books. The first is called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, has 35 chapters. The second is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe with 34 chapters. The third is Life, the Universe, and Everything, also 34 chapters. Fourth book, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. This contains a prologue, 40 chapters, and an epilogue. And the fifth book is called Young Zaphod Plays It Safe, which only contains 25 chapters and a lead-in called Mostly Harmless. Now this is my first reading of this series. I had believed that I had been exposed to this book, or at least the first book, when I was in 7th or 8th grade. A member of my class by the name of Tim was very well versed and quoted this stuff and enjoyed making up crazy random stories based on, I guess, the events of this book. And I took some of his energy and randomness of his stories and kind of incorporated that into my own imagination. And so I owe him a lot, but I guess at the time I never actually read these books because as I've gotten into them now, I'm not remembering anything about what's happened. So this is my very first reading. I have not seen the movie or any of the other side projects that came out of this, but I want to first of all thank Sean and Carter of Sean and Carter Have a Podcast for recommending this series, and what follows will be my thoughts. Alright, so in this collection, the first thing that we find is a foreword, and it's called What Was He Like, Douglas Adams. Now this happens to be written by Neil Gaiman, which is a very interesting coincidence because in my Earhart podcast, I am actually reviewing The Sandman book by book, which was written by Neil Gaiman. So, interesting coincidence there. Apparently, Douglas Adams lived from 1952 to 2001. You can calculate his age there when he died. He originally started off writing radio plays and was actually a writer on Doctor Who, which has become one of my favorite TV series of all time, and was asked by a book company to make a book out of his radio plays. And I think the rest is history. Now, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was written and published in 1979, and it apparently went straight to #1 in the local Sunday paper of Douglas Adams. I don't know much beyond that, but it seems like it was a pretty big success, and of course it's still very well read today by, many of us that are into video games and sci-fi and humor. So after the foreword, there is an introduction, which is a guide to the guide. It's very short, and basically what I found interesting in it was that in 1981, there was a 6-episode TV series based on Hitchhiker's Guide on BBC. Of course, we know that a movie was created a few years ago. It didn't do so great, and there was also an Infocom computer game dedicated to Hitchhiker's Guide. So what I did was I read the entire first book, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I took notes on every chapter. Some of these are the, storyline, key point notes. Some of these are just observations, things that jumped out of me while I was reading it. And that's what I'm going to share for you today. I'm going back and actually recording my notes on all 35 chapters at once. And then I think what I'll do is read the entire second book, taking notes, and then record all of the notes on the second book. I don't know exactly how many chapters are going to be smushed into each episode of this series because some of the chapters are very short, some of them are very long. And in case you were wondering, I do have my towel with me just in case. Alright, so chapter 1, we are introduced to Arthur Dent. He is a human, and we find out that his house is about to be bulldozed for a new freeway bypass coming through the neighborhood. Quite a humorous exchange between him and the bulldozer driver, who's really just there to do a job. We meet Ford Prefect. Ford Prefect is an alien. He is from a small planet near Betelgeuse, and he's somewhat of a boozer. He's been stranded on Earth for about 15 years, and he's basically a roving researcher for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, something that I found interesting about Ford Prefect is that they don't have sarcasm on Beetlejuice, so he doesn't really know sarcasm, but as you'll see, he definitely understands humor. So Ford Prefect does a logic mind trick on the bulldozer driver, and I wondered at this point if he's got some sort of psychic ability. So there's a sub-story in Chapter 1 about playing a drinking game where you have to telepsychically knock over a bottle and the other person has to drink from it. And I wonder how much of this exchange with the bulldozer driver was actually some sort of just straight logic trick, or if it was actually some sort of mind manipulation. Apparently there are only 12 minutes left until the end of the Earth, and what I'll have to say at the end of the first chapter is I already love the writing style. The characters certainly feel Doctor Who-ish to me, the way that the dialogue is written, and even the narration just has these random tangential bits, which are awesome. So in Chapter 2, Ford Prefect takes Arthur Dent to the local bar, basically starts to get him drunk because alcohol is a muscle relaxant, and Ford Prefect basically repeats to Arthur and everyone in the bar that the world's about to end. In Chapter 3, we find that there are huge yellow somethings coming through the ionosphere, not detected by Earth instruments. I immediately caught an interesting trend here because Arthur Dent, in the very opening of the book, kept thinking about the word yellow. And I didn't really pay that much attention to it at the time, but yellow, the color of the bulldozers, will come back and echo through the rest of this book. So Ford Prefect has a sensomatic, which is a little device that actually detects the big yellow things coming into our orbit. He also has what I initially called a thumb drive, and at this point I was like, how did Douglas Adams predict thumb drives? But we'll find out what that device is in a moment. And he basically has the equivalent of an iPhone or an iPad, and engraved on the front of it is "Don't Panic," which I guess proved to be the greatest words of wisdom in what is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. He also carries around a bath towel. We find a interesting piece of vocabulary, a strag. A strag is basically a non-hitchhiker. And then there is a very loud noise, and Ford Prefect tells Arthur that it's probably his house being knocked over, since they're at the bar and Arthur is no longer laying in front of the bulldozer. And suddenly it was as if Ford Prefect's spell was broken. So here is a direct quote from the book that again makes me think that Ford has some sort of a psychic power to kind of lull people into doing what he wants, not just his sort of logical arguments. We find out that the huge yellow machines actually belong to some species called the Vogons, and we see that Ford Prefect has rubber bungs in his ears, so he knows what's coming, even though the people of Earth do not. The Vogons start sending messages to the people of Earth via this great resonance, so everything is vibrating and basically transmitting the message. Now, the head of the Vogons is the Prostetnik Vogon Jeltz of the Galactic Hyperspace Planning Council. Now, at this point, I didn't quite know what the aliens were going to do, but you start to see the first hints of it. And what that is very parallel to Arthur Dent's opening series. Yep, this book is full of echoes. They are basically going to destroy the Earth to make way for an interstellar highway. The chapter ends with the noisy crowd of Earth looking up, then hearing that they're about to be destroyed. Then we have silence, a great noise, and silence as the fleet coasts away.